Hi, I'm Chris Walker from RIO Products, and today I'm hanging out at Yellow Dog Flyshop, and we're going to be talking about some of my favorite freshwater fly lines. So we've obviously got tons of choices at RIO. There's dozens and dozens of tapers out there for every application under the sun. But I really think of the catalog in terms of two separate categories. You have multi-application lines, which are good for sort of an all-around approach. And then you've obviously got tons of specialty product. And depending on how you plan to fish, I would steer somebody towards one or the other of those categories. So if you're the kind of person who's going to take one rod with them, they're going to fish all day with a range of techniques, and you don't want the hassle of switching between lines or switching reels or even carrying a few rods, you're definitely going to want to check out a multi-application fly line. And the very best example in our catalog would be the Rio Gold. This has been one of our top selling fly lines for over a decade now, and that's because it just gets the job done on a wide range of trout fisheries. The taper is set up as a generalist rather than a specialist. So whether you're throwing a small dry fly or maybe an indicator with a small nymph underneath or even a small streamer, the Rio Gold is still a good choice, and that's because of its unique taper design. So this line has got a relatively long head, and it's just a few grains heavier than the AFTA standard. The most important part though is that it's front loaded. So having a lot of weight at the tip of the line means it'll load the rod on a pretty short cast, but the long head behind that allows you to still carry line if you do want to make a longer cast and be a little bit more accurate in your presentation. The other thing that's nice about the Rio Gold is that the short front taper, relatively short front taper, allows you to turn over big flies if you need to. So if you cut a leader back, you can turn over a big bushy stonefly or a streamer. But equally, if you lengthen your leader out, you have the versatility to fish small dry flies with a lot of delicacy and finesse. So that's the Rio Gold. That's sort of our classic example of an all-around taper. Beyond that, you can get into some specialty products. So if I was going to go out and spend the entire day fishing, for example, only small dry flies, like I'm not even going to make a cast until I see a rising fish, you might want to consider a specialty product. A good one in that instance would be the technical Trout. So this is sort of our longest head and our lightest taper within the freshwater series. Light because you're not carrying big flies. It's for specifically those smaller trout flies, whether that's a small soft hackle or a little dry fly, or maybe even a small nymph. But this line is set up specifically for those delicate presentations because it has such a long front taper. So you get really fine, finessey presentation, low line splash when it hits the water. So it makes it perfect for those scenarios, Spring Creek trout or even big rivers that have small bugs but prolific hatches. The one limitation of this is you can't throw a big fly. So if you are going to specialize into a small fly application, delicate dry fly fishing, and you have this line, you would struggle to throw a streamer, for instance. So that's one drawback. The next one we'll talk about is the bank robber. And this one is really a specialty line set up around throwing terrestrial flies at the bank. So hoppers, stoneflies, maybe a dry dropper. I love this line. This is the line I use all summer because that's the fishing I do in the Northern Rockies all summer, is throwing foam flies at banks. It's set up really well for that because it's a relatively heavy head, so enough mass to turn over those big flies. But that weight is very rear loaded in the head as well. And that means you can pick up lots of line, you can mend very easily because there's a lot of weight in the line right off the rod tip, and you can reposition casts pretty efficiently too. It's really easy to pick a stonefly up off the bank and hit the next rock going by as you're floating down the river. So that's the bank robber. That one's perfect for terrestrial fishing and throwing flies to the bank, particularly from a drift boat. The last one we'll cover, and sort of the most heavy and the most aggressive, is the predator taper. And this is the line I would use if my only aspiration for the day was to catch a big fish on a streamer. If all I'm going to do is throw big flies to the bank and strip them back, this would be my choice. This one's a full 2 sizes heavy throughout most of the range, and it's got a relatively short head. That puts a lot of the mass at the front of the line and turns over flies with a little bit more power so you can carry those bigger flies. And it also comes in a range of sink tips too. So everything from a full floater down to this one, which is the fastest sinking. That's a float S5, S7. So it's a 20-foot sink tip that makes your fly dig in pretty deep and hopefully gets you down to where those big fish are feeding. So that's just a short summary of some of the lines I like in the freshwater series of lines. Obviously, you've got general purpose lines. If you're going to fish a range of techniques with one rod, I would start there, like a Rio Gold. Outside of that, there's a bunch of specialty options. We've covered a few of them here, but there's a bunch more you can check out. So if that interests you, you can come down to Yellow Dog Fly Shop and see what's on the rack.